So I was immediately blown away by the writing of C.L. Moore. Having previously read the works of her contemporaries, namely Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft, the contrast in style and substance was wonderful to behold, really. Um, C.L. Moore is an interesting author right off the bat. Uh, since she was a woman writing in a genre at the time dominated by this very masculine presence. There's all these stories of barbarian sellswords and rogue princes and swashbuckling adventurers, right? She actually decided to have her stories published under the name C.L. Moore, not actually because she wanted to hide her gender, but because she wanted to hide her identity from her very prudish bosses back home. So they didn't know she wrote uh, science fiction and fantasy on the side. I think she worked at a bank. Um, so yeah, um, right away in reading the best of C.L. Moore, I am impressed by the sheer emotion shown in her writing. Whereas Howard was very stark and had this grim poetry in his writing, this poetic barbarity to it. And Lovecraft, of course, had this air of this intellectual, studious conceit, right? This nobility. More is just pure heart. Very quick thinking. The stories lead you round and round, and they set you back down rather quickly. Despite the fact that the stories are quite long, longer than the average short story, at least. You don't really have to worry really about being bored. Uh, I want to say most of her stories. I can probably count the instances of boring exposition on one hand. Uh, but her stories, they really stick with that emotional, heartfelt theme. Uh, really, I'm I, my immediate impression of C.L. Moore was that she was a romance author at heart, because her stories follow this very classical, romantic, and sometimes slightly awkward formula where like a character is just overtaken by the beauty of a woman who turns out to be not as she seems, right? And is swept away in this whirlwind of mystery and wonderment and so on. They are weird romances, and by that I mean weird as in the same way weird western is used, or what have you. They are weird romances, uh, mostly good and engaging. Though romance has never been my thing, really, um, and yet they're quite fascinating. Uh, I'll say that I've discovered that the first book I read, Shamblo, was right away more steamy, I guess you might say, than anything I've really read from Howard yet, or at least it 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 leads with the steaminess more so than Howard, right? I mean, Howard's stories got a bit uh, sexy from time to time, and he kind of became known for and ridiculed for that part of his work at times, which might have been somewhat unfair. But pretty much every C.L. Moore story, while still being far from raunchy or particularly uncomfortable, tends to be focused on these concepts of beauty and sexuality, and I almost want to say like uh, what it means to love, right? Many times throughout her stories, we're introduced to this sort of love at first sight concept, though the characters always seem to question whether or not it is truly love they experience or something more base and simple, right? A basic attraction. Um, Shamblo, considered by many her best story, though I'd personally beg to differ, and I'll talk more on that later. It does not follow the same formula, strangely enough. The main character, Northwest Smith, him of the most American name ever, uh, is this roguish, gunslinging spacefarer years and years before the likes of Han Solo came about. And Northwest Smith encounters this alien creature on one of the colonies of Mars. Yeah, her version of space is weird and pretty wild. Just go with it. But this alien creature, taking the form of a pretty young woman, she's being hunted by an angry mob who wants to kill her for being a shamblo, right? But Northwest Smith does not know what that means. He doesn't know anything about Shamblo. He saves her, and to make a long story short, she turns out to be basically a gorgon, right? A freaking Medusa with slimy red tentacles for hair and teeth like a cat, and yeah. Um, Eventually, Northwest starts to figure out his mistake in interfering with the affairs of a culture he knows nothing about. Uh, Pretty only when it's too late, really. She snatches him up in her gross tentacle mass and starts to drain his life force. The creepy ass part is that while he knows that something horrific and awful is happening, it is also like deeply corruptingly, sickly, pleasant. It might very well be analogous even to addiction, to drugs and drink. These things that will slowly kill you and ruin you, and yet your willpower just gets so worn down to the point where you can't help yourself. You can't resist. It's quite clever, really, the way Moore handles that concept. But Northwest does get saved in the end by his buddy, this rogue from Venus called Yarl, who uses a mirror to avoid looking directly at the intoxicating, mesmerizing alien succubus creature, and he shoots her in the face and kills her. So yeah, that's what most people consider to be C.L. Moore's best story. But I'm here to tell you that those people are objectively wrong. No, not really. Uh, you know, Opinions may vary, but apparently YouTubers get more attention if they make these rude, bombastic statements that they don't really mean. Anyway, while Shamblo is a fine story, I personally preferred Black God's Kiss, in which we're introduced to one of Moore's few heroines, Jirel of Jory, this French swordswoman in the vein of Valeria and Red Sonja and Dark Agnes of Howard's writing. Jirel's home of Jory is attacked by this real jerk called Guillaume. Her castle is taken, and Jirel is thrown in the dungeons, likely to await being tortured and humiliated, since she is the ruler of Jory, apparently, and a woman who's given Guillaume a lot hell. He's she's given him a heck of a lot of trouble taking over. Um, but she manages to escape, swearing this torturous vengeance, and she decides to seek a weapon to be used against Guillaume. Now, Jarell knows she can't beat him in a fair fight. She's tried that before and failed, which I think is important to the growth of any character. Is failure, is getting knocked down a peg and then coming back, right? Some fights you just can't win without going to the land of the dead and stealing a bunch of black magic from the devil himself. Wait, what? So there are caverns beneath Jory that lead to hell, basically. Um, that's what Jarell thinks, at least. It might be some sort of Howard-esque deity's playground, right? Instead of actually hell. It might be Shar or Set or some such. Um, but I don't think that really matters because this long serpentine tunnel that trails down and down and down beneath the earth. It leads deep into the earth and then opens to a wide plains and rolling hills. It's bright and clear with a night sky that is strange and alien. Jarell doesn't recognize any of the stars, right? Um, and then she soon does battle with these imp creatures, these goblins who start clawing at her, trying to kill her. But she hacks her way through them with her sword and finds all sorts of bizarre stuff littered throughout this weird plane. There are these lost souls who hop around like frogs, and they look like people, only pale and kind of sickly, drained of blood, and yet strangely beautiful, almost eerily so. And there are horses who aren't probably not actually horses, who scream with human voices for pining after their lost loved ones. There's a palace of light in which Jarell discovers a demon who assumes Jarell's face in order to communicate with her. So this demon that looks like her tells her that the weapon she seeks is out on a lake and gives her directions to get there. Now, Jarell's hot and bothered about the giant warlord living in her castle, and she believes that even considering this notion, that even coming this far, has damned her soul for all eternity. So she makes perhaps the unwise decision of trusting this demon, taking its word at face value, and heading for the lake. Um, Now, there's some trickery afoot. She finds an invisible bridge which leads across the lake to an invisible temple in which sits this stone, squat, sexless, one eyed creature, this statue with lips puckered for a kiss. And Jirel, feeling this otherworldly draw to the statue, she kisses the thing and feels this dark, evil presence pass into her. She realizes that the kiss is the weapon that she sought. That this all-consuming evil presence has gone inside her and will kill her if she doesn't pass the kiss along. Um, my theory so far is that the demon didn't think she'd survive. I think it was supposed to be a monkey's paw situation, but I think her willpower was so strong that she was able to keep it down long enough to escape the hell dimension, find Guillaume, and kiss him, which he, of course, allows because he thinks she's hot and he's an arrogant piece of crap. In the last moment before their lips meet, the poor dummy sort of realizes that all is not as it seems, and she kisses him anyway, and he crumbles like an Oreo cookie soaked in milk for 67 seconds, and Anne had no willpower at all. And everyone's scared of Jarell now that, well, the story ends there, but I assume Guillaume's boys are going to hightail it since they don't know what that crazy witchy woman is capable of. Yeah, that's my favorite story. Can you tell why? It's freaking bonkers. I love it. I really do. It's great. I'm glad I read it. The rest of C.L. Moore's stories range from good to just kind of all right. Um, and often all right comes down to personal preference, right? there isn't a moment where she stops being a good author, right? There's just a few times where I would have done things differently. I think it's hard to complain because not only is C.L. Moore an amazing writer who more people need to look into, but she's from Indiana like me. Actually, my whole family on my mother's side happens to be named Moore. Um, I know it's not like a super uncommon name, but hey, Moores from Indiana. I like to think there's a connection there. Might explain where the writing comes from for me if we're distantly related. And my name's Connor Landon. CL, and she was a CL, and I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, go read CL Moore. That's in order, and subscribe to my channel while you're at it. Like and subscribe, and ring the bloody bell while you're at it. Um, do it, you fools, um, or perish or something. Do it. Is it working? No. All right. Bye. Anyway.